Okay, so remember when the idea was say yes to everything because we might miss something, and then it changed to say no to everything or what doesn't serve you? You know what? It's pretty confusing. I've been on both sides of the argument at times. So here's the thing, the answer is both. It's important to sometimes say yes to things that are scary, different, and hard because they help us grow. But it's equally important to say no to things that deplete us. Things we know in our gut are not going to benefit us or others and may, in fact, drain our batteries, leaving little room for things that we don't want or need to do. So, joining me today to unpack all of this and more are two very sharp women who have a lot of insight into how we can build a life that fits us as individuals in this season of our lives while also benefiting the people who depend on us, our family, our friends, our community. But sometimes, in order to strike this delicate balance, you have to hit the pause button. This is something I am not very good at, I will admit. These are just a few of the things we're going to talk about today. So my first guest is my friend of 30 years, Jodi Bradley. She worked for 25 plus years in the tech space as a design strategist and a customer experience expert, and now she's a consultant. She's also a talented artist who has spent many years trying to figure out how to pursue her passion for art while also having a job and a family. But most of all, Jodi is a lovely, kind, insightful person who believes we can all transfer some of the design strategies she learned in corporate America to shaping our own lives in powerful and productive ways. My second guest is Amy Ginsburg. Now, I was introduced to Amy through Jodi. Amy has done it all. She has a master's degree in teaching, an advanced degree in fundraising management, and is now a professional certified coach specializing in career and retirement transitions, which is something we talk about all the time on this show. So Jodi and Amy met in an 11-week course called Designing Your Life, aimed at helping participants shape their next chapters. Another big topic on this podcast. This led to the formation, and I love this title, of the Kick Butt Women's Club, comprised of women living across the U.S., ranging in ages from 50 to 80. They share their obstacles, their wins, and workshop life's challenging moments together with the common goal of supporting each other. Welcome to the program, ladies. I know that was a really long intro, but you guys have so many interesting things in your background to unpack. I've touched a little bit on it, but Amy, why don't you start and talk about how you met Jodi and what really connected the two of you?
Yes, thank you for that introduction. So, Jody and I met, as you mentioned, at the Designing Your Work workshop, which at the time was an online course. It was during the pandemic. And the very first day of this course, the day that I met Jody, was actually on my 50th birthday. So that resonated for me when hearing about the focus of your Ageless podcast. And I'm sure more about that workshop will come out in our discussion. Jody and I were then invited by another woman in that group with us to join what she at the time later framed as the Kick Butt group. But she said, would you like to be part of our 50 and older women's group? And I thought, hey, no, I don't actually. Like, I'm not quite ready to be part of that group. But there was so much energy and so much, drawing me to this smaller group of women that came from this larger group that, obviously I said yes. And Jody and I have been meeting for, I think it's been over 3 years now, Jody. And Jody and I do share many things. And I also have a background in art. So there was a time in which Jody and I broke off and started talking art stuff. So that's a little bit of how Jody and I met.
Yeah, and I think it's so common for us to have these passions outside our traditional career and try to figure out, is that part of our career path? And should it be, or should it continue to be, something we do on the side? So Jody, tell me in your own words how you connected with Amy. And I love this idea of the Kick Butt Club. I mean, what a
Yeah.
cool idea, because women really are powerful, right? When we get together.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, as Amy said, we met at the course, and so Amy and I have never met in person. I'm on the East Coast, she's on the West Coast, and it's amazing how you can build connection virtually, because that's literally how we met. It was a course where there was breakout sessions and we met virtually. And as Amy mentioned, joined this, kind of cohort of women afterwards that have been continuing to meet. And it's just been an awesome group of amazing women, all different backgrounds too. So it's been, I think, really valuable for all of us to be able to continue to share where we are in our life's journey, because we did a lot of hard work in that course and we talked about a lot of difficult challenges we were facing. And so having a support group to continue those conversations and to keep us accountable too, I think and Amy, you are so good at that. You're very good at keeping us accountable, especially me. Jodi, when are you going to be in your art studio again? I remember you. I'm going to write down, what you said. So, Amy and I definitely connected through, I think, our passion for, sort of this area of, helping people with, designing that next chapter and, kind of strategies for that. And Amy, it reminds me we have to get back together to do the art session we talked about. So thank you for that reminder.
It's funny, Amy, you said, oh, I don't want to be part of that group. And it's the same feeling I get when I get the AARP stuff in the mail. I'm like, no, I'm in denial, right? But it's interesting because I feel like the reason this podcast came about was because I was spending a lot of time workshopping these issues with my immediate core group of women. Jodi's one of them. And I realized that so many women are going through these transitions. Talk a little bit about your background. I mean, you have a varied background. You've done so many things. How did you get to this moment of being a coach in this space? What was the path that led you here?
Yeah. So the Designing Your Life workshop actually was a very pivotal point in that. So I knew that I did not want to stay in the fundraising field and was very consciously looking for my next professional chapter. And I've now gone on and become a Designing Your Life coach and use that as part of my toolbox. So it's kind of ironic, but part of that course, and it's not all of it, but it's geared toward a wayfinding exercise that kind of says like, okay, you've got option, 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4. And then of those pathways, which one is the wayfinding, the path that you're going to follow professionally. And in some women, it may not have been a professional choice. I think for many of us it was, but for me, it certainly was. So that's one sort of way of answering the question. One of the doors that I had identified through that wayfinding exercise was to become a therapist. And for years, quite frankly, friends and family have said, hey, Amy, have you thought about becoming a therapist? So there's something in my being that others had recognized. And then it was through researching the therapy field. I even had identified an art therapy program on the on the East Coast that I was going to participate in. And I was looking at the prerequisites and filling out the application. And I didn't even want to do the prerequisite courses. I was like, this is just not quite right. So through the exploration, discovered what coaching is. Honestly, I was one of those people that rolled your eyes at a life coach. I was very type A personality, like, oh my God. And it took me a while to embrace that my choice was really to become a coach. The distinction between coaching and therapy, which some people, the fields are growing, and therapy has so many different veins, but traditionally therapy tends to be more past focused, healing focused, restoratively focused, which I love all that stuff. And coaching tends to be more future focused. What is it that people want to create moving forward in their lives? Again, much of therapy does include that as well. It's certainly a Venn diagram, but ultimately it was very clear to me that coaching, supporting people on the sidelines, speaking from experience, not offering advice, not being the expert, which tends to be the role of therapist. Those were the things that drew me energetically. And so it was hugely transformative the year that I went through my coach training program. It was like being coached on steroids. It was just like absolutely transformative for me. And so that honestly, certainly sent me on this professional trajectory. Ironically, in this moment for the last few months, I've been serving in the same role that I resigned from when I opened my coach practice 4 years ago. But I'm finding that I'm showing up there so differently as a contracted fundraiser for a short period of time. So I am just so grateful for the opportunity, as you mentioned, to pause and to follow the energy and really take a look at how I was showing up in the world, in my relationships, and say yes to things like this kick butt club. And to your point, say no to other things and really honor who I am, and who I have been in each of these chapters in my pathway.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jody, you and I did a women's retreat a couple of years ago, and you were talking at that point about designing your life and talking about how you had learned a lot of strategies in the tech world, which is interesting to me, or the corporate world, that you thought could be applied to life. So, talk a little bit about your journey, your background that kind of led you to this moment as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's, you look back and you think about, for me anyway, what was I really like when I was younger? And for me, I was an artist. I was a creator and an artist, and that was a big part of my life. And I majored in art through high school and was discouraged taking art in college. So my life took a different direction. And I just set that context up because, fast forward, it's like you said in the intro, 25 years working for large tech companies, did some really interesting work around helping teams creatively problem solve, for the company and solve some of the problems that we were facing with, customers and product development and things like that. But it takes, after a while, it takes a toll. And I think for me, at that point, after doing that for so long, raising two kids, you experience burnout. It was during COVID. It was a scary time. And I had this friction building up between, where my life, what I was doing, like what am I doing? It just does not feel true to me anymore. And that was a really critical point for me, kind of reaching this point where my health was even suffering. And I said, I've got to do something, I've got to shake this up. And so I left my corporate job and I started creating art again. And I said, oh my God, why haven't I been doing this? It feels so good. It feels so true. I feel like I'm coming into my own again. But then fear sets in, right? You're like, oh, but I've got two kids to put through college and I have bills and I have, financial commitments and retirement to save for and things like that. And so I think for me, that fear was, and for many people, like really real. And you get stuck in it, right? And you get stuck in it and it gets hard to find ways to become unstuck. And that's where, this course, similar to what Amy said, it was pivotal, in terms of just taking some of the strategies. I was like, this is interesting, taking these strategies I used to help teams in corporate America and, use those to reflect on and design, what's that next chapter for me and alternative ways to do that. There's not just one way. So I think, the course was really important in giving me clarity on direction, clarity that, this art is more than a passion. It's really something that's in my DNA and something that I need to make, an integral part of my life. And I have to figure out how to balance the other things that I need to do, And so between the course and, following that up with, I think, an 11-week course on how to create a creative business, those things really enabled me to think that it was possible. Like I could do this and I could find a path. And so, I'm still on that journey, but I've found a way that I can be a consultant, part-time in the public sector, doing really meaningful work for the community, while I have, more energy to pursue, the art, pursue some of the other interests that I have, so I don't lose, I'm not losing sight of, that goal that I have. And so, yeah, it was a long road, right? To get to, sort of that clarity.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, I mean, I tell my audience, and you know this, Jody, I am still on the road. I am still journeying on this road along with my audience and trying to figure it out. So, welcome back. A lot of what you are both saying and a lot of what I talk about in my ageless presentations is reframing your life, empowering yourself, but I think it's important, to talk about tangible things we can do to move in a direction because we could talk all day long about how important it is to find that next chapter. Amy, why don't you start? What are some steps in your coaching business that you recommend to people who are looking to make changes?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming, and I want to just preamble that, my style of coaching is really to mostly listen and to follow the energy and follow the guidance of my client. And so the tools that I would pull out of my toolbox will be very customized to whoever I'm talking to. So it is not a one-stop shop or a sort of first we do this, then we do that kind of thing at all. And I know because, I was prepared to answer this question. I was thinking, like, what are the tools that most commonly come up in conversations? And quite frankly, even just talking to my mom this week, who's in her 80s, the kind of framing of that conversation it happens to be something that comes up often with clients. And so I think it would be relevant to anyone listening. And I, not ironically, but to be pointed out that this was first realized by me, interestingly, in this Designing Your Life workshop. In the book, it talks about, so there's a book, anyway, people can research the Designing Your Life workshop. It's out of Stanford University. They talk about different ways of knowing. And I would offer that certainly for me and in my family, and I would argue in our culture, our American culture, we tend to put a lot of value on cognitive intelligence, those pro-con lists, which are really valuable and less in tune with these other ways of knowing. And I would even say that, I come from a background where, my father was a businessman and, we'd sit around the table and it was clear that his gut instinct was part of his knowing and part of his intelligence and success. But yet still the cognitive and pro-con lists somehow were weighed more on most days than those gut instincts. And to really flesh out and start paying attention to those different ways of knowing. So whether it's that intuitive gut way of knowing, whether it's your physical intelligence, like, I remember talking to a client who said, I made this decision about switching to this particular job and like, I just couldn't sleep all night. That's your body's wisdom. It's not my client's head pro-con list. The pro-con list said one thing and her body said another. And so honoring these different ways of knowing, I certainly use that as a tool. I never thought about it that way before. And I didn't necessarily honor these different ways of knowing. There are a lot of people that sort of list different intelligences rather. And emotional intelligence is certainly part of that, the feelings. Different people categorize them differently, but just this awareness that we can weigh different wisdoms. It doesn't just have to be the head's wisdom that is the most valued of our insights.
Yeah,
So
I think
cool.
that's a really good. I think that's a really good point. I sorry to interrupt. I had somebody tell me one time because people ask me to do things all the time, and I used to say yes to everything, and now I'm learning to say no. If you don't, if you said this thing's going to happen tomorrow, and in your head was like, oh, I wouldn't do it tomorrow. Well, don't do it in 6 months. Like, just don't do it. Like, don't say yes. And so I try to put that in my head now. When somebody asks me to do something off the cuff, I can be like, yeah, I can do that in 3 months. And then I go to my gut check and I go, do I want to do that? No, I don't want to do it tomorrow or in 3 months. So anyway, I think that's the gut is a really important part of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, and just to sort of fully sort of, the share one other element that people often talk about, and I had no idea I was doing it, is social intelligence. So I was one of those people who I'd be calling my mom, I'd be calling Jodi, I'd be calling a friend to ask their insight on something so super valuable, but I never really thought of it as a way of knowing or a wisdom or an intelligence, as one of the many tools that we have. So I just thought I'd put that in there too, that reaching out to a friend to ask for insight is a way of knowing. It is part of it.
Yeah, it's like networking. You're workshopping it. I mean, I joke with my friends, I'm workshopping this. What do you think about this? And Jodi, to that point, I mean, you've been so valuable in my life helping me workshop things. I left a job 2 years ago, and Jodi was telling me for 5 years that I had a lot of other interests that I needed to pursue and put energy into. So, Jodi, what do you think in your mind? What are some of these tangible things that have helped you make this gut check that says art has to be part of my life in some way?
Yeah, no, and that I'm so glad you raised that, Amy, about the gut check thing, because I can't tell you how many times I went the other direction, away from my gut. My gut was telling me one thing, my head was saying another, and those were the decisions that weren't the best ones, And so it's hard to do to get in touch with that, but I've made it more of my process to really think, like, how am I actually feeling about this in my entire body? And it's super super important to get in touch with that. I think for me, there's two exercises I'll just talk about that helped me. One is just reframing. So you talked about reframing in your intro, Amanda, and it's a really powerful tool to reframe, because it really opens up possibilities for you. We all get stuck in certain beliefs and things where there's just one way to do something. For me, I couldn't see beyond getting another corporate job as the answer, because how am I going to pay my bills? The answer is, well, just find a better job, or a job that suits me better. And that's not necessarily useful, or when you need to do the kind of reflection you need to transform, to move to something that really serves you better. And so reframing is a way that you can do this. You could start by just thinking about what needs attention in your life, and that could be, a work thing. It could be, things that, like, play in your life, or relationships, or your health. What needs attention, and thinking about that, and just putting in front of a statement, how might I bring more enjoyment into my life, more play into my life, doing things just for the sake of doing them. I know that's something that I did not allow myself to do, is to have time to just play, just go do something for the sake of doing it. um, Putting that how might we, or how might I, in front of it, really opens up possibilities. And you can imagine a lot of things. You can go and brainstorm with friends, with your network, with your partner. You can brainstorm ideas and ways that you could kind of solve that, life challenge that you have. So I think that's an interesting tool, and something that, I reflected on a lot, to help myself get a little bit unstuck and thinking, trying to get thinking out of the box. The other thing is just energy. Amy, you mentioned following the energy, and I think tapping into, and even if you want to log it or journal it, what is giving you energy, and what is draining energy from you, because we want to do those things that give us energy, that are keeping us engaged, and do less of the things that aren't serving us, that are draining the energy out of us. And sometimes when we're so busy and caught up in life, we don't recognize those things as much as you would think. And I know when I took a moment to really settle in and kind of track, like, what was giving things back to me and what wasn't, as much as I thought I knew the answer, it's something about seeing it laid out and seeing like how much time I'm spending on things that aren't serving me, that are sucking the life out of me. Why am I doing these things? And so sometimes it's just merely, simple as taking a week and jotting things down at the end of the day. What did I do today, and what felt right, what didn't, and kind of reacting to that, reflecting on that. So those are two things that I think really helped me just sort of start my wheels turning on where I needed to go next and what I needed to gravitate towards. And that's,
And those are great. Those are awesome, tangible tools, for people to think about. And I know you're a big fan of the whiteboard, and fan. Jodi's a big fan. Whiteboard. If you're out there and you need somebody to represent you, Jodi's available. And so I actually have a whiteboard that I put all my episodes on. And recently, because I work basically in 3 different areas: podcasting, writing, and public speaking, I put those 3 things on the whiteboard. And I said, okay, how can I do all these things? Do I want to do all these things? Is there an order to them? Is there a percentage of my time and energy that should go to each category? Or is it a day? Do I say, today I'm working on this, or today I'm working on this? Amy, one of the things that we talked about at the top, and we've touched on this throughout our conversation, is saying no, saying no, saying no. And I mean, I am still working on that. How important is it to be able to say no, again, to things that don't serve us, that suck the life out of us, that drain the battery?
Well, how important is it for us to say no? It's hard for me. My brain just sort of sees the question even within the context of a binary yes, no. And so it's like, it's hard for me to even, see beyond that. I would offer that even categorizing it as a yes, no is perhaps part of the paradigm to start breaking down. And that's actually a lot of what my coaching looks like. It's that we are all living kind of within the frame of a painting, right? And right now, this part of our conversation is sort of within the binary yes, no. Like our conversation is within this frame of, do we do it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it yes? Is it no? And what I would actually offer as an additional tool, as a way to answer your question, is, what would be possible if we actually stepped out of that frame and it was no longer that view of the world? In my coaching world, we call that context. Like the frame is the context, and the content could be anything. It could be working with our kids. It could be, our corporate world. It could be whatever the stuff is. And, in our conversations with friends and colleagues and so forth, we talk about the stuff, like the date or the dinner or the losing weight or the, whatever it is, the art, what have you. And that's just the stuff, but really the context within. If we could take a step outside of that framing, it just opens up all kinds of possibilities. Like, what if we weren't even thinking about it in terms of saying yes or saying no? What if we were just thinking about as like living our life to the fullest? Like, what would that look like? And it's not to make your question bad. It's just like, wow, I hadn't thought about it that way before. That's what comes to mind when you ask that question.
No, and I appreciate you putting it in that way. I think one of the things I've been working on is, and it kind of goes back to the gut check, and it also goes back to living your best life and being happy, is not just saying no, but like not offering an explanation. Just, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, next. Okay, yeah. What do you want for lunch? Just really like not like laboring over it. You know what I mean? Just going with, how does this make me feel? It doesn't make me feel like the direction I want to go in. So I appreciate that perspective a lot. You've both talked in your background notes about pausing, and that it takes pausing to have a real breakthrough. Jodi, what does that look like? Because we live in this really crazy, chaotic world where I feel like we just get constant information coming at us all the time through our phones, through our computers, whatever it is. to the point where pausing is really something we have to intentionally do, right?
It is. It's really, really hard. It's hard to do. And, and just thinking about the word pause is kind of funny in a way too, because, we're saying pause, but we're really saying, because it's very actionable work. This pause is actionable. But it's like taking a pause is really taking time for yourself, like actually setting aside intentionally, as you said, time for ourselves, which, a lot of times as women, we're not so great at. We spend a lot of time caring for others in our lives and putting others first. And it's really, really important to figure out, what a pause could mean for you. And it could be, I'm going to set aside, time each week. I'm going to spend 30 minutes each week, kind of just reflecting on some things, using some of those strategies, we've talked about. It could be, I'm in my daily walk. I'm going to just sort of cycle through some ideas for where I want to go, just whatever it is, just taking time for yourself. If you can do something that's more prolonged, like concentrated couple of days or a weekend or something, that you really sit down and think through where you want to go and what needs attention in your life and where your energy is being spent and where you think you want your energy to be. I think it's so valuable. And it's something I struggled with, taking this pause, but it paid off. It's really, really important. And so, just committing to it is important so that you can kind of get rid of that noise you talked about, Amanda. Because you got to get to the clarity. You got to get to clarity of where you want to go, and that simplicity of what I need to focus on, and getting that narrowed down to be just a few things, because we've got so much going on. But it's that reflection piece that really needs to be done. And you can't do that if you don't set aside some time. So you got to do the work, right? A little bit of the work.
I agree with you. I just went on a trip for 2 weeks, and it was awesome, visiting family and friends, and had a lot of great adventures. But I carried a book with me. I never opened it. Now, I think I was not reading the book in favor of being with other people. So that was a good thing. But I just have the hardest time pausing. And I've realized since I left my job, my traditional job, I have filled my plate again. And I got to figure out how to dial that back. I did do a 30-day pause on social media, which was really helpful. I also did no buy July, which was helpful too on Amazon. Sorry, Amazon. But I do think that's really valuable. Amy, what do you think about how we
Yeah,
pause in this chaos that we call life?
I appreciate the question. And I really also appreciate the way that Jodi started off. Um, you said many things, Jodi. One was you really pointed out that if we can fully, deeply recognize the value of pausing, if we have that experience, then we're more likely to actually make that part of our lives. So I appreciate you pointing that out, Jodi. I would also say that, again, my brain just always is seeing the frame within we're talking. And, this idea that it's hard to take a pause, that in and of itself, we could question, like, is it hard? Like, if we say it's hard, it's going to be hard. So, like, what if it's actually not that hard? Like, what if we kind of break that frame down and, throw it away, if you will? It doesn't have to be hard. Pausing, it can be neutral. And what does that open up for us if we don't sort of enter the space assuming this is going to be a struggle? So that would be one offering. The other offering, knowing that many of your listeners are, in 50 and older age bracket, the research shows that one of the commonalities later in life for men and women, and people who identify other non-binary, is there is this commonality of looking inward it is a stage in our lives where we tend to be more self-reflective. And there's possibly a lot of reasons for that. Like possibly some of us are getting off that hamster wheel and it's just sort of a natural time to self-reflect. But there's something in our wisdom that is making us pause more than when we were in our 20s and 30s. So I offer that as just like further fodder to like, it might not actually be that hard, especially for those of us who have some life experience, to just kind of sit back and, watch the party for even just a moment, just reflect on what's happening in front of us. So I offer that is in the research.
That's great. And I do believe when I was doing that social media pause, not my work social media, but my personal social media, made me more engaged because I wasn't taking pictures all the time. I didn't feel a need to post all the time. Of course, I've slid right back into it. And then the other problem is the scrolling, the constant scrolling. I've tried to get away from that and in favor of reading. So trying to get back into that. What occurs to me by talking to both of you, and I love your bi-coastal friendship that you've never met in person. Hopefully that will happen at some point. Hopefully I'll get to meet you at some point, Amy. It's just the power of women coming together, right? This kick butt women's club, having the support of other women in your life, family, friends, community. How important, and you guys can both answer this, how important is that? I mean, Jodi, if you'll start to making these decisions.
Oh God, it's so important. I mean, it's like a lifeline, it's really special to have a group of women that you can go in and just lay it all on the table, and they can ask you the hard questions. They see things that maybe you don't see yourself, which I think happens a lot. You're in it, you're in your life, and people outside are going, well, what about, what about this? Like, what about your art? Where is that now, that you're doing that, helping steer it back, and just sort of that safe space, I think. It's that safe space of saying things that are really difficult about where you are in your life. And just having the group has been incredibly valuable from that perspective. And Amanda, we have our little girl gang, right? And that means, the world, I think, to all of us to have that support as a group of women, just to be able to have that community and that friendship. And, that's super important, just, for filling that bucket, that connection bucket. So some of it is about connection, some of it is about helping you move forward, but I think you need a little bit of both of that, together.
And Amy, you're a coach, so you have it all figured out, right?
Oh,
I
all of
know.
it. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but my point is, so who do you go to? Because you are someone that is trying to help other people in this space. So how do you get your support and advice?
Oh, the same way as everyone else. And I'm on my journey just the way I learn so much from my clients. I learn probably more from them than they learn from me. And you know, I love again, Jodi, your comment about connection. So I tend to be drawn to research. And so, and now I am a retirement coach, and all of the longevity research, all of the retirement research and fulfillment in this later chapter of life, however we define retirement, like to your example, Amanda, like you're retiring and you have this encore career, or other people mentor people. I have clients who have quote retired and become checkout people just because they wanted the social engagement. They didn't need the money, so there's all this stuff. Anyway, all of the research shows that connection with other humans is like the juice. And then when you look at a little more deeply, and I have for a long time now been following all the like blue zone research. So why is it that people across the globe live the longest and are most fulfilled? It's connection with others it's having a life's purpose, which you also spoke about, Jodi. And those are the two things that really, feed my retirement coaching practice. And then the other two is about eating wisely and moving naturally in terms of longevity. I tend to focus less on those, but they do come up in conversations if they're important to clients. So you asked me like how do I move forward, and those things guide me, and knowing that connection and having a reason to get out of bed in the morning, that kind of soul's purpose, like that drives me. And I think it's also worth mentioning that this Kick Butt Club, it's one of the groups that I connect with. And you've alluded to also, Jodi and Amanda, that you have, several groups of people in your lives. And we took a break. The Kick Butt Club, we met monthly for, I don't know, it was about 2 years. And then the energy just kind of waned. And I remember talking to another member and sort of saying, my sense is that like, this is just kind of like, there's not the energy there anymore. Like, what do you think? And it's my sort of leadership way, not that I'm the leader of the group, but to be like, should we get together again? And we both agreed, like, no, like the energy just isn't there. And then about a year later, the energy surfaced, and now we're meeting quarterly. So I think it's important just to use that as an example that there's no right or wrong way to connect with people. And it might be that you take a break, or who knows what, the specifics are. So those are a few of the things that come to mind for me.
That sounds like most of the book clubs I've started, where everybody's really in, and then I feel like I'm wrangling them to get there. As Jodi knows, I'm a big connector. I love connecting people. I love creating groups of people. I love bringing people together, especially lots of different types of personalities. So I agree with everything you both said. How can people follow what you're doing, Amy? How can people find you?
Yeah, the best way really is my website, which is amyginsburgcoaching.com. And Ginsburg is spelled with a U, as you and I have discussed, Amanda.
Yes, I got it wrong.
No, it's all good. So amyginsburgcoaching.com. I have a contact form there. I check it daily. That's really the best way to get in touch with me. I do have a LinkedIn page as well, which is, named similarly. And quite frankly, circling back to like, do what you want to do, don't do what you don't want to do. I don't want to write newsletters. I don't want to post a lot of social media. I don't have an Instagram. So these are a lot of the things that I don't do, very much by choice. And so, yeah, reach out. I'd love to I offer complimentary conversations with anyone. Most coaches do. It's very common in the industry. Like, why would you connect with somebody and if you don't even know them, right?
Sure,
So
you got to
it's
get there.
very common just to like
get a vibe check.
Yeah. And I can meet with people for like a month and just sort of get to know them. And then there's a decision of like, do we want to work together? And I also would just offer that I do partner with financial advisory firms quite regularly. So I offer kind of the more holistic side of retirement planning while they're offering the financial side. So that's really the main pipeline of my
that's a great niche.
Yeah. So that's a lot of how I work with people. But yeah, amyginsburgcoaching.com.
And Jodi, what about your art? How can people see your art?
Well, you can follow my art journey on Instagram. So Jodi Bradley Art.
Gotcha.
And then I have a LinkedIn page as well. It's Jodi Bradley EXP Design.
Okay. And I'm going to just announce right here that I think my next retirement job is going to be working at a stand-up paddleboard place and renting paddleboards and coaching.
Yes.
Coaching paddleboard.
Do it.
First time users. So, I think that's where I'm headed. Talk about the checkout person. I was like, oh, okay, that could be fun. Okay, what's something I could do? Ladies, thank you so much for your time. You have been invaluable. I tell you, every time I speak to rock star women like you guys, I talked to somebody yesterday, I said, oh my gosh, you are exactly who I needed to be talking to today, because what you have said really spoke to me. And so I know that it's going to speak to my audience, and I just appreciate you so much. So thank you for taking the time. You've been great.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity.